Everything was rosy in the world of Arsenal. We had our striker. We were spending money hand over fists. And then those lot up Merseyside have thrown everything out of whack again. We're going to discuss the latest Arsenal transfer news, these Alexander Isak rumours, the Hugo Ekitike saga, and more with a very special guest in today's Arsenal Transfer Show special. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Arsenal Transfer Show specials, the episodes where I'm joined by a special guest. I'm very happy today to be joined by a good friend of the show, host of the Arscast Extra and writer, of course, and owner of Arseblog. It's Mr. Andrew. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
Hey, Tom. How are you? I'm good. Thanks very much.
Yes, very good, mate. Survived the warm weather. Ireland experiencing it as well, I've heard from the pod.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I could do with a bit more of that, but today was a bit more Irish, shall we say. We've had some sun and a lot of rain and everything else in between. So, yeah, back to normal, unfortunately.
Yes, so very much here it seems that way as well. We've had the rain, we've had the clouds, and it's got a little bit warmer this afternoon, but it's apparently going to get even warmer again next week. So we might be blessed with yet more sunny weather. We'll have to wait and see. We've been blessed with some pretty sunny transfer news this summer from an Arsenal perspective so far. It's been the busiest it's probably ever been. At least in recent memory, I can remember Arsenal doing as many deals as they have. But as it is, of course, we record this going out just after 5 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. David Ornstein broke the story, of course, around Liverpool's approach for Alexander Isak, which has relevance to Arsenal because we know that Isak has been mentioned in the circles of Arsenal for a while. We know that Mikel Arteta is a big fan of his. And, of course, it sparked something of a response from the fan base as well. So with it breaking, I kind of want to just grab your thoughts around that and how you're feeling now. We've already committed to the centre forward that we're going for this summer.
I think it's been stressful enough worrying about our own transfer dealings without getting too bent out of shape about what other clubs are doing, what other people are doing. I know it's always a thing, you look at a signing that another club makes and you might like that player and think, oh, I wish we'd gone for him or what have you. But I do think that we have had a job of work to do this summer. We had a big decision to make over the striker that we wanted to bring in. We appear to have made that decision. Maybe with the idea that Alexander Isak was not somebody who was available on the market this summer. Maybe that's kind of where we were with that. But ultimately, we've made a decision. We've decided that we're going to bring in Viktor Gyökeres, and what Liverpool do or are trying to do, I get why people get a bit freaked out or unhappy. But from my perspective, I'm more concerned with what we do and make sure that we have got the players in place for next season and the players who can deliver what we need them to deliver, in order to stay competitive and hopefully pip Liverpool or Man City or whoever else it is to the Premier League next season. I think if we're sitting here mid-July with essentially 6 deals done, 6 players brought in, I don't think you can really accuse Arsenal of sitting on their hands.
No, I think I set out at the beginning of the window and was kind of pinpointing what I'd like. And I think I went through 6 different positions, of which Arsenal have covered, all of them, really. And that 7th one for me was always the luxury attacking midfielder signing of, and I theorised and manifested the idea of Eze, which seems to be a genuine possibility for us during this summer window. But are you surprised with how kind of aggressive and how much Arsenal have done before even we're halfway through this summer window?
No, not really, because I think it was obvious what we needed to do. Therefore, you're not trying to work out the market dynamics, or you're not trying to work out, where do we really need somebody? We needed a backup goalkeeper. We got a backup goalkeeper. We needed a deep lying midfielder. We got that one. We had that one sorted back in March with Zubimendi. We needed somebody to play that kind of backup role, which we've got in Christian Norgard. I think I mentioned the goalkeeper. We needed a winger. I know it's not necessarily the winger that everyone wants, but he's still a winger. And we needed a center forward, and that looks like it's going to be happening as well, on top of a defender who we needed also. And I think the profile of these signings has been really interesting. There's a mix of experience and guys who you know, if we want to win the Premier League next season, we want players who can come in and deliver from day one. So there's a mix of good experience, Zubimendi, loads of experience, Norgar, Premier League experience, Kepa, Premier League experience. Yakarez is 27 years of age. He's not some kind of project player. You know, he knows what it's all about. Even Madueke, to an extent, you know, has had good seasons at PSG or PSV rather, and then Chelsea. So he knows the Premier League. He's pretty much ready to go. You know, how much you think he can deliver, that's another question. Those are debates that have been going on. And then the only one who's maybe a bit younger is Christian Mosquera, who's coming in from Valencia. But when you're signing somebody to play backup to someone as good as William Saliba, then, you know, you've maybe got to go at it in a different way. And I think they've done that. They've brought in a young player who's got lots of potential. So I'm not surprised, because those positions were obvious, I think, to pretty much everybody. Where I think we might find a surprise, or maybe a happy surprise or not happy surprise, who knows, between now and the end of the window, is how the market develops. If there's interest in somebody else, if an opportunity becomes available to sign a player like an Eze, like a Rodrigo, someone like that, are we in a position to be able to do that before the end of the window? I think those are the ones where there's a little more uncertainty. But in terms of what we absolutely needed, I think we've got. And then I think from all the reporting, it looks like we're open to doing more if that player becomes available, or indeed if there's room in the squad for that player to be brought in.
Yeah, really well surmised. I think that Arsenal had, you know, clearly the positions down. I remember before we'd go into windows and we'd go, it's this target and this target and this target in terms of names. But this summer felt more like positions that were being targeted and a roster of potential options that Andrea Berta had looked to try and negotiate with before pivoting towards the one that we looked most like to get. And how have you kind of assessed the difference between Edu's approach to transfers and what we perceive? Because obviously we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what goes on. But how have you felt about this shift from the previous sporting director to what we're experiencing now?
It's such an interesting question to consider, because I think under Edu, there was always a sense that we were building towards something, and we nearly got there, right? We nearly got there 2 seasons in a row. And then we had this season last season where it didn't go the way we wanted in the Premier League. And Edu left, and we had to do something. We had to bring somebody in. We brought in somebody with a lot of experience. This is a guy who did a lot of deals at Atletico Madrid, so he knows the game. And I think that, coupled with the desire to get as much done as possible before the start of the season, so you're not, you know, going into those first games going, we're sort of waiting to see, will this guy move here, therefore we can move for that guy. I mean, I think it wouldn't be just down to Andrea Berta, but I think it is clearly a club strategy to get this stuff done as early as possible. I do think maybe as well that the fixture list played a part. When you look at those opening fixtures in the Premier League, the opening 6 fixtures in the Premier League, if that doesn't bring everything into focus for you, then nothing will. So I think I would have been more surprised if Andrea Berta came in and we were dilly-dallying here, there, and everywhere. If we get to this point of the season, we still don't know what striker we're going to get. We still don't know. Are we looking for a backup goalkeeper? Are we looking for this guy? You know, we've been pretty decisive. We've been pretty decisive about what we want to do, and how these deals are perceived now versus how they're perceived in 8-9 months' time is fascinating, because I think when you sign a player, you always kind of project the best possible outcome onto them, you know, as a fan. Even if you have reservations about somebody, you sort of, you park them to an extent, because you actually want them to be good. Even if you say, I don't like that player, but if he comes in, does well, then it's good for Arsenal. So I think there has been that, you know, there's been a no-nonsense approach to the summer to ensure that when this season kicks off, we are ready, 100% ready. And then if we can add something a little extra on top of that before the end of the window, that might get people excited as well.
Yeah. that extra something special does feel like, the Eze line. And with him being a player who's not necessarily, he doesn't, if he was to come in, for me, it'd be Arsenal sign Eze. He's a headline I think goes down as one of the signings of the summer, without a doubt, just because of the stature of the player, what he's done in the Premier League already, obviously the finances attached to that deal.
Yeah.
He used to be at the club as a very young player and kind of that whole, full circle journey, if you like. But the interesting thing about that is that he doesn't necessarily have a ready stamped starting role in this Arsenal team as well, because you've got Odegaard. He's not necessarily an out and out left winger. So how do you see that as a deal that in your mind you piece together and go, yeah, that makes so much sense to do that deal?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't. I love Eze. I think he's brilliant. I think he would be a fantastic signing, but I don't, like you, see a really obvious place in the team for him. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a really interesting thing to consider, because in every other position we've made a signing, you can see where they fit. Zubimendi, backed up by Norgard. Yakarez is a centre forward. We need a centre forward. Madueke is a winger. We've needed backup for Bukayo Saka for as long as Bukayo Saka has been in this first team. Mosquera, is a guy who will deputize for William Saliba and take some of the burden off him. And he can also play on the left-hand side as well of central defense, which might tell us something about whether or not somebody else goes from the defensive lineup. But Eze, he could play left eight, could play where Odegaard plays. He could play on the left-hand side a bit, even though I don't necessarily think that is his best position. I think he's much better internally and centrally, where he can do more damage to the opposition, because he's quick, but he's not like lightning. He's not one of those super fast wingers or anything. He can play as a number 10. He can play just behind the striker. So for me, it's really, really interesting to consider the idea of Eze, and also embrace the idea that we don't know exactly what the plan might be for him, because it feels to me anyway like a slight departure on what we've done so far this summer, but also a slight departure in terms of how we think Mikel Arteta operates, because he doesn't usually deal in a great deal of uncertainty, does he? You usually have a fair idea. Well, this is where he is, and this is what he'll do, and this is where he'll go. And I think it's also interesting to consider that if we're buying Madueke and he's going to deputize for Bukayo Saka, where does that leave Ethan Nwaneri for next season as well? So you've got two players in Eze and Nwaneri, and I hope Nwaneri signs a new contract, by the way. That'd be great news. We've got two players who are kind of like jokers, for want of a jokers in the pack.
Yeah.
I don't mean jokers like,
I know what you mean. Yeah,
but jokers in the pack, like wild card players. So I think that's quite an interesting thing to consider. I sometimes feel happy that I can't sit here and say, well, this is exactly what's going to happen, because part of why I think maybe people were a little fed up last season was because we were a bit predictable. And there are reasons for that, because of the injuries and all the rest and availability. But if you have got that, or those two options, and Arteta's throwing Eze on for Odegaard at one point, or starting him ahead of, somebody, Declan Rice, I don't know. I don't know why that would happen, but if he plays left eight, Declan Rice plays left eight, where does it all fit? How does it all fit? I don't know. And I kind of like that.
Yeah. It's that chaos factor that we've perhaps been missing. I don't think I had an easier time writing an article than I did writing the predicted 11s last season. You knew what was going to happen. You knew where each piece was going to fit. And a lot of that was down to injuries, of course, as well, and the shortness in the team. But that in itself leans into why we've had to have so much come in this summer and have that depth and have those options. Norgard, Mosquera, they're coming in to be those options. Madueke, it's a lot of money, but you look at the deals that are done by clubs at the top of the tables, and they spend big money on players that aren't rubber stamped as starters in those 11s, because they need that competition and depth for particularly attacking positions. Manchester City have done it for years, and that's why they've been so successful in part as well. And speaking of them, like, you've seen the business of City done pretty early. We mentioned Liverpool a little bit earlier on, of course, as well, and they're clearly not done with what they want to do. But with us being now less than, just over a month out from the start of the season, how do you see Arsenal shaping up? Because obviously it's great that we're doing all these signings, and it's a big boost for us that we're having these players. But the other side of the coin is it also piles on the pressure and the expectation on us to go and deliver then next season.
I mean, that pressure and expectation was there last season as well. You can't be, and this is, maybe some people won't want to hear it, but after what happened last season, or they might think something of the manager, but we're a really good team, Tom. We're a really good team and have been for 2.5, 3 seasons now. We got to the semifinals of the Champions League last season. If we'd had a bench, who knows what could have happened against PSG. If we'd had a striker or a winger, or, we didn't. But we still got to the semis of the Champions League. We almost won the title the season before. We had a really good title challenge the season before that. We are a good team. And with that, naturally comes expectation anyway. I think the expectation would not diminish, or what people expect from this Arsenal team, having done what we've done over the last few years. If we were sitting here having made no signings, that expectation would still be there. So the expectation would be manifested in drama about not making any signings, but the expectation of what fans want from the team, which is obviously silverware, success, we all want that. I don't think it would be any different. So for me, I don't think it really adds any pressure to have done what we've done. I think there'd be more pressure if we were scratching around and we were being indecisive and we didn't know what striker we were going to get. So for me, it sort of releases the pressure valve a little bit, because you can get down to the work that you need to do with these players to help us win the league or win the Champions League next season. So that's where I am with that. I don't see it as something that is a negative. I see it as, we had stuff to do. We've done the stuff. Now we've got to do the real stuff, which is on the pitch.
Yeah, and that is obviously going to take its form in a number of different ways, I think, next season. With all these additions, it gives Arsenal and Arteta in particular, of course, these different avenues to try and find ways to win games. And that's why I'm really open to, as we go back to kind of the idea of an Eze signing, because we talk about that chaos factor, that unpredictability that we can add to this Arsenal team for next season. Having that is critical. And not only that, but I think players like Eze and Gyokeres add something else, Andrew, which is kind of this match-winning factor that we've, I think, have lacked. And there's really the burden's kind of fallen quite a lot on Bukayo Saka in particular, to be this player that can pop up in moments. That's why even when he looks tired, Arteta keeps him on the field, because if you're at 0-0 or 1-0 down or 2-2 in games, he's there to win you a game, because we haven't really had too many other profiles quite like that. And Eze and Gyokeres, I remember watching a few clips of Gyokeres when he was at Coventry in particular, playing in England, and he would have poor games, but would pop up in like the 80th minute with a screamer from outside the box as the centre forward. And that's all he needs to do to win you a game and to score a goal. So is that something, I guess, that excites you about the potential for this squad next season, is to have more mercurial talents, if you like, in the side?
Maybe that, but not just mercurial talent, options to change the dynamic of a game, options to change the way you play in game. Like, let's say we're I don't know, first game of the season, who knows, Yakarez starts up front, right? And Saka starts, and Martinelli starts on the left, let's say. And in the need to score a goal and win a game, you look to your bench and you've got Eze, and you've got Waneri, and you've got Kai Havertz, and you've got maybe Leandro Trossard, or maybe it's a different kind of winger if Trossard goes and you bring in that other player. Those are the options that you need. We did not have those options last season. We had Nathan Butler-Oyedeji, for example, who, with all due respect to him, was not going to be the guy to get you a game or get you a goal to win a game. So it's really about the options much more than the mercurial talent. But I will agree with you. I think a little bit of chaos, something a little bit different, would be absolutely welcome.
Andrew, I'm just going to take a quick break to refresh my StreamYard. Everyone heard what you said, but I heard nothing, because StreamYard does this to me sometimes. So I'm just going to refresh, and we'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, we should be back. Andrew, I should be able to hear you now. Fingers crossed.
You got me?
I got you. Lovely stuff. It's really odd. It does it to me sometimes.
I've got a lot of background noise from you now, if that's part of it, but I don't know.
That'll be because the microphone has changed. So hopefully this now has fixed this problem.
There you go.
Lovely stuff. Okay, all fixed. Yeah, I'm sure what you said was wonderful, and I can't wait to listen to it back later. When it comes down to...
Basically, what I said was yes to mercurial talent, but just having options, which is what we didn't have last season. We just did not have the quality or the depth on the bench to win us games that we really needed to win.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely spot on. And I hope that somebody like Ødegaard as well can get that back in his game again, because, and I think we saw that actually towards the end of last season, the strike he had at Liverpool that led to Marino's goal and the goal that he scored at Southampton, that showed what's in his game still, and he is there and he can produce that. And a player like Eze coming in might even push him to reach those heights as well. And you don't want players sitting comfortably in their positions. You want them to be on edge. You want them to be being pushed to the absolute maximum, and having a player like that would definitely help. We're going to take some questions from the chat box in a second. So for the last 15 minutes or so, if you want to chuck capital Q to help them stand out in the chat, that'd be great. And we'll go through as many of them as we can as these go through. Thanks, by the way, for the kind comments that you've got leaving in. Plenty of fans of Andrew yourself in there this evening, and lots of compliments coming your way. So make sure you're a subscriber to both channels, of course. And if you want to get extra content on the Arsecast, you can do that by signing up to their Patreon, of course, which is available as well. Lastly, just before we go to those questions, I kind of want to talk more on a social level just for briefly, because the Madueke signing in itself sparked quite a reaction online. And I know that in particular X is a festering cesspool of horridness a lot of the time. And if you want to go somewhere to find some mad reactions, you can go there. But I've had conversations in person with friends of mine who have spoken, in some ways pretty scathingly of a player that's not kicked a ball for us yet. So what have you made of that backlash? And do you have any concerns, or is it the opposite, about how he might respond to that? Because Ramsdale, of course, spoke pretty openly about the reaction he got when he joined the club.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can draw parallels between the reaction to the Aaron Ramsdale signing and when it became clear that he was somebody we were going after. I remember very well, a lot of the comments, you're paying how much for this guy? And, listen, I get it. I think there's a very significant amount of Chelsea fatigue involved in this, where if we were signing Madueke from any other club, there would not have been the same reaction. There's this sort of sense that you're bailing Chelsea out, right? I think a lot of it has been, I saw some of the most extreme stuff, not because I'm on Twitter anymore, but because you just can't help but see it. And people quote that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, Madueke has not done anything wrong. If you're angry about the fee, then take it up with Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta and the Arsenal board who sanctioned that fee, right? I don't think it's fair to put that fee on the player. I personally, he wouldn't have been top of my list. Let me say it that way. I think the fee is a bit high.
Yeah.
But, the
going rate for the wingers in the Premier League this summer has been that figure.
Well, it kind of has been. And I think maybe we understand a little bit, by the way, Brian Mbomo from Brentford has been linked with Manchester United, and they were talking about 50 million for Brian Mbomo. And if I'm Brentford, right, and I'm looking at Arsenal paying 50 million for Madueke, and Newcastle paying 55 million for Elanga, and Spurs paying 55 million for Kudus, who got 4 goals last season. If you want me to sell you Brian Mbomo, I'm looking for a lot more than 50 odd million, right? So, that is kind of the market rate for these guys. There is precedent for a player who has been not wanted to come in and do well. Ben White was another one to a much lesser extent. People couldn't get their head around the 50 million pound fee. Looks pretty much like 50 million pounds well spent to me at this point. Even Ramsdale, even though it didn't end well for him, became popular and people liked it. So I feel a bit sorry for the player, to be honest, because that's he's not blind to it. I saw that he turned all his Instagram comments off because people were in there abusing him, and you just have to despair that people don't have anything better to do with their lives than send abuse to a footballer on his Instagram. Like, come on, you can hate the signing if you want, but like, talk to your mates. You don't have to go to his DMs or whatever, So I do feel a bit sorry for him because, at the end of the day, he's a young guy. He's 23. He'll want to come to Arsenal and do well, but he also knows that, like, there's a whole bunch of the fans here who don't want me, and they might be just. I think the thing to say is that the online reaction versus the reaction he will get inside the Emirates Stadium is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
When he's when he makes his debut, when he's first announced, he'll get a big cheer, and if he's good for Arsenal, if he scores goals, people will respond accordingly. If it doesn't work out, then that's an issue for Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta. They're the ones who decided to spend the money on him. So I think the player deserves, whatever you think of him, whatever you think of the deal, the player deserves a clean slate when he comes to Arsenal and pulls on our shirt. He should be judged only by what he does on the pitch and not the price tag, because he had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, and Jay asked the question, which I think obviously we've kind of tackled this, and the biggest concern with Madueke away from the fee is where his mindset's at. Is he coming with the attitude to take Saka's spot, or is he happy to be a rotation option? And I think this was one of the biggest challenges about this position, is that we mentioned Mbomo there, he, to my understanding, and I think David Ornstein will put this out at the beginning of the window as well, was Arsenal's primary candidate to be a wing right-sided signing, to be a competitor. And effectively, he's just said, I'm not interested in being a number two to Bukayo Saka. And I don't blame him. And I imagine there's a lot of players of a very high standard who Arsenal would have liked, who simply don't want to be a number two and are specialised on that right-hand side. And Arsenal absolutely, in my view, had to find a resolution to the issue that effectively was our biggest damaging blow to the title last year, losing Saka for 4 months. I mean, losing Saka for 4 months anyway, even if you have a replacement, is a very, very big blow indeed. I think I was listening to Elliot on the Vision say he doesn't care who you sign. If you lose your talismanic figure for 4 months, you're not winning the title. If Liverpool lose Salah for 4 months, no matter who they've got, they're not winning the title.
Correct.
But obviously, we managed to get to 2 cup semi-finals last season, and perhaps having the extra depth, not just there, but in other positions, could have given us that little extra that we might have needed to go a little bit further. Go on.
The other thing might be we don't know the conversation that Arsenal have had with Madueke. He's left-footed. He can play. He doesn't really play a lot on the left. I did look at the stats and I looked at his figures, and most of his appearances have been as a right winger. Is there scope for Arsenal to do something a little bit different with one of the flanks at some point? Because we play with these inverted wingers. Saka right-footed, left-footed from the right, Martinelli right-footed from the left. So the natural tendency is to sort of come inside. Whereas if we want to stretch teams, if we are, for example, facing a team with a low block, how can we pull that defense as far apart as possible? It is by maybe going outside the fullbacks. So is Madueke an option down the left-hand side? In which case, it makes a little bit more sense for the money that's involved. It's hard to reconcile a fee of that much with a guy who is ostensibly, on paper anyway, back up for Bukayo Saka. That's where I think people have had a little bit of an issue, But if there is the idea that he could play some kind of a role on the left-hand side and give the team a different dynamic, whether it's from the start or whether it's late in games, depending on the opposition, then maybe it makes a little bit more sense.
There's a couple of questions around the Gyokeres stuff and kind of I call it, some people call it delay. I wouldn't call it a delay. It's just kind of the finalization of these little details. I know there's been reports in Portugal this week again. I think it's the second week in a row we've had the headline including the word collapse in it. I kind of been telling people, well, we heard those headlines last week, and yet look what happened over the weekend with more credible reporting, of course, around it. So don't get too sucked into it. And D says, do you think that us paying 52 million for Madueke has hindered us somewhat in the Gyokeres negotiations? As Sporting see that if we can pay that money up front, then we can pay more now. Just before you come in on that, Andrew, obviously we didn't pay 52 million pounds up front. The initial fee is 48.5 million pounds, and that isn't a fee you're paying necessarily all in one go either. But yeah, how do you feel about kind of how that Madueke deal? Because that was kind of the issue we both shared with it. of what it was, with how that's affected what else we might want to do.
I don't think it affects the Gyökeres deal in any way at all. I think from what I understand and from what I've heard from people today, it is Sporting doing what Sporting do and making life difficult and complicated. It feels like it's been a complicated situation for Yakarez and his agent this summer. You know, we heard about Sporting reneging on that deal, that gentleman's agreement. Don't do gentlemen's agreements in football, guys. Get it all in writing. That is the cast iron rule on this. But from what I understand, it really is about the structure of the add-ons, where Sporting want that add-on 10 million. It's 10 million euros. They want that basically guaranteed. So it might be a case that they want like half of it when he makes 5 appearances, and Arsenal would have said, well, typically it would be like 40, 50 appearances, something like that. We want it after he scores 10 goals. It might be, normal to push that to 20, 30, 40 goals before you activate an add-on clause. So I don't think it's a financial thing. It's not that we're not prepared to pay that money. It's just about what way Sporting want it. And they have some previous with this kind of thing, I think, with other deals, with other players.
Porro and Fernandez, yeah,
exactly. So this is what they do, and this is probably something Arsenal should have expected. Maybe there's a bit of frustration because they really want him to go on the tour, and time is ticking in that sense. But I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that we paid whatever we paid for Madueke. I think they're completely distinct.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't think one is related to the other. Arsenal were always going to be looking to spend a significant fee on trying to bring in depth for that Saka role, no matter what other business they wanted to do was. And we were always told consistently, the Eze deal in particular is separate. That interest is separate to our protracted negotiations surrounding bringing in depth for Saka's position. And Amaro Gunner says, I'm a bit fed up with Gyökeres Sporting trying to get more money. I'd give them till Friday or walk and show some class. I mean,
but then do what?
Exactly.
Where do you go? Do you go like, Ollie Watkins, and everyone will go, oh, what are you buying Ollie Watkins for? Why didn't you pay what they want? I get it. There's no winning really. People want you to do your business quickly, then complain when you negotiate.
Yeah.
Football transfers.
When you get it done, and Liverpool sign Isak, and we should have waited.
There's always another angle. There's always another angle and another point of view, which I guess is what makes football so interesting.
Yeah, I know people get sick and tired of being told to be patient, but yeah, if you're not made for these transfer windows, then you're just not made for them. You need some patience. You need to chill out. We're only halfway through this summer. I know it feels a lot longer than that, but we are only halfway through. Wes says, Tom and Andrew, if we get all the targets that we need and want, what do you think Arteta needs to do this season to give us the best chance of winning? So we've got all the players, and this is what my wish was at the beginning of the window. I said that I wanted Arsenal to be in a position, which we weren't last season, where come its conclusion, if things don't work out, I wanted to be in a place where I can only look at the manager. Really, that's where we want to be, is where you can only point to one person. But we weren't in that place last season for a number of reasons. So what is it, do you think Arteta needs to do to take up that and level us up, if you like?
Well, I mean, we need to score more goals than we did last season. But I think the thing that stands out for me is that if you are going to build a squad like this, if you are going to get the redundancy in every position, right, you need to use those players. You need to sort of trust in your squad and be able to prioritize your fixtures. You've heard him say it a million times, Tom, in press conferences and everywhere else. The only game he's thinking about is the next game. But if the next game is, Burnley at home, but the game after that is Liverpool away, then I think you need to think about Liverpool away before you think about Burnley at home, right? What's the best way to get the maximum performance at Anfield? And that might be counterintuitively to leave out some of your best players against Burnley, but then trust in your squad. Trust in your squad. If it's, if it means Madueke starts ahead of Saka, you can still give Saka 20, 25 minutes if the game needs changing. If it's Waneri rather than Odegaard, if it's I don't know if it's Mosquera ahead of Saliba, if it's Norgard ahead of Zubimendi for that game, if it's Mikel Merino ahead of Declan Rice at left 8 for that game. Those are the things that allow you to keep players fresh and elicit the best performances in the biggest games. And I'm not saying you don't take Burnley seriously.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying at all. Because what I've just said is, you bring in 3 or 4 international players for 3 or 4 other international players, right? I'm not talking about putting in the kids. I'm not talking about just going to academy level. He has to, if he's built this squad, he has to trust the squad, all of the squad. Because I think part of why we haven't quite been able to get it over the line is that in every season we have been relying on a too small a group of players without enough depth. And it looks like this summer that is something we're addressing, but then it's down to the manager to implement that and to use the full extent of his squad. So that's what I think we can look for, beyond other things like some tactical variation and maybe adding a bit of chaos, as we talked about earlier, doing some things that people don't expect, but managing his squad in the best way possible to get the best out of every player between August and May. That's what I'm looking at from Mikel Arteta this season.
Someone desperately trying to get in touch with you, Andrew. It's David Cunningham, who says he's dropped in for a £2 super chat. It says, "Hey guys, Andrew is my uncle's cousin. Can you confirm nor deny this rumor?"
I absolutely can confirm it. Hello, David. How are you?
There you go. I don't know if I should forward that £2 onto your uncle's cousin.
I don't think you have to pay £2 for it, but there you go.
They wanted it to stand out. It worked.
There you go.
There you go. We'll try and take one more. There was one. You can answer this as openly or as closed as you like. Let me see if I can find it. Where has it gone? Effectively, the question was along the lines of both Stuart McFarlane and David Price have left Twitter this week, announced they weren't posting anymore. I think the question was along the lines of, what do you make this? Is this kind of a symbol of like seeing the backlash to the Madueke stuff? And obviously, we can't comment on them personally while they've made those decisions. But you yourself have left that platform as well. So is it just indicative of kind of where that platform's kind of going? I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why those guys have decided that they're not going to post there anymore. I can completely understand why they don't. It's not that there aren't good people on there.
Yeah.
There are. And to some extent, you used to be able to cultivate your own experience on Twitter because there were always idiots and always, that kind of nonsense going on. But you could cultivate your own experience. But with the way the site changed under the ownership of your man, and then the changes they made to the algorithms and the blue ticks and all that kind of stuff, it just became a mess for me. I don't have time for that kind of relentless football banter culture where everything you say and do is picked apart. Even listen, and this is a serious point. I saw some things doing the rounds when Diogo Jota was killed.
Yeah.
And this is whatever way it happened. This is a young man that lost his life along with his brother and left 3 kids behind, and his wife and his extended family, and people are going at each other, to score points for the football team that they support. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing here? I realize there's a very big audience there for Arsenal. I don't expect Arsenal to stop posting on there or anything like it. But I think if you are an individual with any kind of following, then it becomes more and more difficult to deal with the day-to-day interactions on Twitter. And I'm not saying this to be boastful or anything like that.
No, of course not.
We've been on there for a long time, Tom, and spent, built a big audience and a big following, but the bigger it gets, the more difficult it becomes to manage and maintain, and you become more and more exposed to stuff that you do not want to see on a daily basis. And I just do not want to see that stuff. So I presume that's pretty much what's happened with Stuart and with David. It's a shame because, you know, they're great guys and they bring a lot to the online Arsenal community with the work that they do and the pictures that they post. But obviously they've experienced things which have made them say that's enough. And maybe that should give people a bit of pause for thought.
Really, really well answered. People know kind of my view on it. I use examples all the time of, you know, the button that you used to press that said, I'm not interested in this, used to actually do something. Doesn't do anything now.
No.
If I see something and I'm not interested in it, I'll press that button, but I'll see something very, very similarly related within seconds. And then again soon after. So it's a really well, and if indeed both Stuart and David have made the decision based off of that, and again, we don't know the reason behind it, but thank you for asking the question. I absolutely empathise with them if that is the case. I think we should finish on a light-hearted note. Sure. And Tom, for people that are desperate to tell us things by dropping in super chats, holy moly, I might be concussed after wrecking on my ride, but I get to catch Tom and live, and Andrew is on my screen as well. Cheers from Tampa. Well, Tom, I hope you're okay.
What does that mean? Wrecking on my ride? Does it mean he's fallen off his bike or something?
I can only assume it does. Tom, I hope you're fine. I know Tom personally, so I'm really hoping you're okay, Tom. Thank you.
Well, his typing hand is good, at least. You know, maybe he's sort of shattered from the waist down. The legs down don't work, you know?
Absolutely.
I like the way you finished on a lighthearted note, a guy being concussed after falling off his bike. But I guess compared to Twitter, it was, you know,
Tuesday. Yeah,
it's slapstick comedy, isn't it? People falling down and hurting themselves is always good.
Who doesn't like a bit of Schadenfreude? You know, it's good. It's good comedy these days. Tom, I hope you're good, man. Do put WhatsApp me though. Andrew, thank you so much for your kind words and all of your, of course, interactions with us today, and giving us your insights, all the questions as well. Really appreciate it. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
In all the usual places, arseblog.com, and you know, the Arsecast is available wherever you get your podcasts. Going to be out in Singapore as well for a bit of preseason at the Newcastle and Milan game, so we'll have some live stuff from there. You know, we'll be reporting from the preseason tour, whether we see Big Vic or not. I'll tell you what he's like in the flesh. If people are interested, you know, they can follow me there. And you know, Blue Sky is where I'm a bit active on social media as well, if they want to join me over there. But yeah, thank you to everybody, and they're always very kind in the comments, and I appreciate that. And we'll chat soon, hopefully.
Indeed. We have an update from Tom who says, I took a tumble on the bike, but it's better than Twitter. So
right, Tom.
You've absolutely smashed that one, Tom. Thank you, mate. Thank you, listeners. Do drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed. Of course, subscribe. I'll be live tomorrow morning as usual at 8 a.m, giving you the latest roundup of today's Arsenal news and getting your questions, of course, answered in part 2. Make sure you are subscribed over on Arseblog's YouTube channel. You can do so by, of course, clicking his name in today's video title. And, of course, listen to all the podcasts available on all the usual platforms as well, and get access to extra stuff by signing up to the Patreon too. See you soon. Have a great evening. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.